I remember the moment my world cracked open like a fragile eggshell underfoot. It was a rainy Tuesday evening, the kind where the sky weeps endlessly, mirroring the ache in your chest. I sat alone in our dimly lit living room, the glow from my phone screen casting shadows on the walls. As I scrolled through the anonymous post I'd made just hours before. His texts, those damning words of betrayal, were now out there for the world to see. Stripped of names, but dripping with truth. And then, my phone buzzed. It was him. "Please, forgive me, I beg you." The words stared back at me, hollow and desperate, from the man who'd shattered everything we built. My hands trembled, not with anger anymore, but with a quiet resolve that had been building like storm clouds on the horizon. How had it come to this? Me, the woman who'd once believed in forever, reduced to leaking secrets in the dead of night. But let me take you back, dear listener, to where it all began. Before the storm, there was calm, a life that felt as steady as the rhythm of waves lapping at the shore. My name is Alina, though, in those days, everyone called me Ellie. I was 38, married for 12 years to Marcus, the man I'd met in college when we were both wide-eyed dreamers. He was studying business, always with that charming smile that could light up a room. And I was pursuing nursing, drawn to healing others, because I'd spent my childhood watching my mother fade from illness. We lived in a modest two-story house in a quiet suburb of Seattle. The kind with white picket fences and neighbors who waved as they walked their dogs. Our home smelled of fresh coffee in the mornings and lavender from the candles I loved to burn in the evenings. Marcus worked as a sales manager for a tech firm, often traveling for conferences while I balanced shifts at the local hospital with raising our 2 children. Liam, our energetic 10-year-old boy who loved soccer and building forts in the backyard, and Sophie, our sweet 7-year-old, with her mother's curly hair and a laugh that could melt ice. Life was a gentle routine, woven with the threads of everyday love. Mornings started with the sizzle of bacon on the stove, Marcus humming off-key as he poured orange juice for the kids. "Ellie, you're my anchor," he'd say, kissing my forehead before heading out the door, his briefcase in hand. I'd watch him go, feeling that warm flutter in my chest, the kind that comes from years of shared dreams. Weekends were for family outings, picnics, at the park where the grass tickled our bare feet, or movie nights on the couch with popcorn kernels scattering like confetti. Sophie would curl into my lap, her small fingers tracing patterns on my arm, while Liam argued with Marcus over which superhero was strongest. It wasn't perfect. There were bills to pay, arguments over forgotten anniversaries, and the exhaustion that creeps in after long hospital shifts. But it was ours, built on trust that felt as solid as the oak table in our kitchen where we'd share late-night talks over herbal tea. Marcus's family was part of that fabric too. His mother, Rita, lived just a few miles away, a widow with a sharp tongue, but a heart that showed in the homemade pies she'd bring over on Sundays. She doted on the kids, knitting them scarves in winter and telling stories of Marcus as a boy. "You two are meant to be," she'd say, patting my hand with her wrinkled one, her rings cool against my skin. My own family was smaller, my sister, Carla, who lived across town and called every evening to check in, her voice a lifeline on tough days. Work kept me grounded. As a nurse, I dealt with pain and recovery daily, which taught me patience and empathy. I'd come home smelling faintly of antiseptic, shedding my scrubs like a second skin, and slip into the role of wife and mother. Marcus was my partner in it, all helping with homework, surprising me with flowers on random Tuesdays, his touch gentle as we lay in bed, whispering about our future. Retirement by the sea, we'd dream, with the kids grown and visiting with grandbabies. It was a life I cherished, one that felt earned after the hardships of my youth. Yet, even in that warmth, tiny fissures can appear, unnoticed at first. It started subtly, about 6 months before everything unraveled. Marcus began staying later at work, his excuses rolling off his tongue like rehearsed lines. "Big project, Ellie. You know how it is." I'd nod, stirring dinner on the stove, the steam rising like unspoken questions. His phone, once left carelessly on the counter, now stayed glued to his pocket, buzzing at odd hours. I'd catch him smiling at the screen in the quiet moments, a soft, secretive curve to his lips that wasn't meant for me. At night, he'd turn away in bed, his back a wall where once there'd been open arms. I told myself it was stress, the company was expanding, after all. But doubt is a seed that grows in silence, watered by the little things. The faint scent of unfamiliar perfume on his collar, like jasmine mixed with something sweeter, not my usual rose. Or the way he'd avoid my eyes when I asked about his day, his responses clipped, like "fine, just busy." One evening, as rain pattered against the windows like impatient fingers, I found myself alone in the kitchen after the kids were tucked in. Marcus had texted he'd be late again, another meeting. I poured myself a glass of wine, the deep red swirling like blood in the glass, and sat at the table, staring at the family photo on the wall. We looked happy there, all smiles at Liam's birthday party, cake frosting on Sophie's cheeks. But something nagged at me, a whisper in the back of my mind. I shook it off, chalking it up to fatigue from a double shift. Little did I know, that whisper was the first thread pulling loose in the tapestry of our life. I tried to push the doubts away, like sweeping crumbs off the counter after dinner. But they kept returning, stubborn and sharp. The real turning point came on a Friday night in early spring, when the cherry blossoms were just beginning to dust the sidewalks like pale confetti. Marcus had told me he was attending a team-building retreat 2 nights away. Nothing unusual. I kissed him goodbye at the door, his cologne lingering in the air after he left, and watched his taillights disappear down the street. The house felt too quiet without him, so I busied myself folding laundry in the living room, the soft hum of the dryer, a small comfort. That's when his work phone buzzed on the coffee table. He'd forgotten it's something he almost never did anymore. I stared at it for a long moment, the screen lighting up with a notification. The preview showed a heart emoji and a name, Lila. My stomach twisted, but I told myself it could be innocent, coworker, a friend. I picked it up, thumb hovering over the lock screen. We knew each other's passcodes. It had always been that way. Trust, we'd called it. I typed the code. The phone opened. The messages were there, unhidden, a thread that stretched back months. I scrolled slowly, the words blurring at first through the sudden heat in my eyes. "Miss you already. Can't wait for next week. Last night was incredible. You're my everything." Photos, intimate ones that made my knees buckle. I sank onto the couch, the laundry basket tipping over, socks spilling onto the rug like fallen soldiers. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat, a frantic rhythm that drowned out the ticking clock on the wall. I read every message. Every sweet nothing. Every plan to meet. Every lie he'd told me to cover his tracks. There were receipts, 2 hotel bookings, restaurant charges I recognized from our joint account, things I'd dismissed as business expenses. And her name, Leela, kept appearing like a signature on every betrayal. I learned she worked in marketing at his company, younger, prettier in the way that social media can make anyone look flawless. They'd been seeing each other for almost 8 months. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the phone. I sat there, in the dim light, the rain starting up again outside, tapping against the windows like it was trying to get in. My hands were ice cold. The house smelled of the lavender candle I'd lit earlier, now cloying and sickening. When the kids came downstairs asking for water, I forced a smile, tucked them back in, kissed their foreheads. Then I returned to the couch and kept reading until there was nothing left to discover. The next morning, I acted normal. Made pancakes, poured orange juice, kissed Marcus when he walked through the door, looking tired but satisfied. He hugged me, said he'd missed us. I let him. Inside, something had shifted permanently, like a bone that breaks and never quite sets the same. For weeks, I gathered evidence quietly: screenshots, time statements, bank statements. I saved everything to a private folder on my laptop, password protected, labeled simply proof. I wasn't sure what I would do with it yet. Part of me wanted to confront him, watch his face crumble the way mine had. Another part, the quieter, colder part, wanted something more final. Something that couldn't be talked away or forgiven in the heat of tears. I started sleeping in the guest room, claiming I needed rest after long shifts. He didn't question it much. Maybe he was relieved. The kids noticed the distance, asked why Daddy and I weren't sharing a bed anymore. I told them grown-ups sometimes need space to think, and they accepted it the way children do, trusting that the adults will fix everything. But I wasn't planning to fix us. I was planning to end the illusion. One late night, after the house had gone still, I opened a new browser in incognito mode. I found a popular forum, one of those anonymous confession boards where people post secrets too heavy to carry alone. I created a throwaway account, blurred the faces in the photos, redacted names and places. Then I posted the thread: "My husband of 12 years has been cheating for 8 months. Here are the messages." I don't know what to do. I attached the screenshots, the timeline, the proof. I didn't name him. I didn't need to. The details were specific enough. I hit post before I could second-guess myself. Then I closed the laptop, sat in the dark, and waited. The post spread faster than I expected. By morning, it had hundreds of views, then thousands. Comments poured in anger on my behalf, stories from others who'd been through the same, advice ranging from divorce to therapy. Someone recognized the hotel chain. Another spotted the company's logo in the background of one photo. Whispers started traveling, first online, then in real life. A coworker of Marcus's texted me late one night: "Alina, is this about Marcus? I think I know who Leela is." The unraveling began quietly, then grew louder. The first real crack appeared at his office. It started with whispers in the break room, the kind that travel faster than official memos. A junior marketer, someone who knew Leela well, had seen the post. She recognized the phrasing in the messages, the inside jokes. The way Marcus always signed off with that same little winking emoji. She didn't say anything publicly at first, but she told a friend, who told another, and soon the thread was being passed around on company Slack channels, with screenshots circled in red. By Monday morning, the HR department had received an anonymous tip. They pulled Marcus into a closed-door meeting. He came home that evening, pale, tie loosened, eyes red-rimmed, like he'd been crying in the car. He didn't tell me right away. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at the untouched plate of lasagna I'd made, fork in hand but not moving. The kids were already in bed. The house was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional drip from the faucet I'd been meaning to fix. Finally, he spoke, voice barely above a whisper. Someone posted things online about me. About us. He swallowed hard. They have screenshots. My messages. With someone else. I didn't flinch. I didn't gasp. I just looked at him steadily, across the table, the steam from my tea curling between us like a veil. "I know," I said softly. His head snapped up. Confusion, then dawning horror. You knew. I've known for weeks, Marcus. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. He searched my face for anger, for tears, for anything he could recognize. But I had already cried every tear I had left. What remained was cold, clear calm. Why didn't you say anything? He asked, voice cracking. Because I wanted to see how long you'd keep lying to my face. He dropped his head into his hands. His shoulders began to shake. I watched him cry the way a stranger might watch a storm through a window, distant, almost curious. The man who once held my hand through labor, who cried when Sophie said her first word, who promised me forever, was sobbing because his secret had finally caught up to him. He begged, then. The words tumbled out in a rush. I messed up, Ellie. I don't know what came over me. It was stupid, selfish. I love you. I love the kids. Please, we can fix this. Counseling. Anything. Just don't leave me. I let him talk. I let him promise. I let him reach for my hand across the table. I didn't pull away, but I didn't hold on either. My fingers lay limp in his. I already left you in my heart the night I read those messages. I told him quietly. The rest is just paperwork. He looked like I'd slapped him. Then, he got angry, sharp, sudden, the way cornered animals do. You think you're perfect. You think you never made mistakes. I was under pressure, Alina. The job, the travel. I felt invisible at home sometimes. I almost laughed, quiet, bitter, invisible. I raised our children, kept this house running, worked night shifts so you could chase promotions. I smelled like hospital bleach more than I smelled like me. And you decided that meant you could sleep with someone else. He had no answer for that. He just sat there, deflated, the fight leaking out of him like air from a punctured tire. The next few days were a slow avalanche. Lila was let go. The company couldn't afford the optics. Marcus was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Clients started pulling backward travels fast in tight industries. Friends we'd known for years began to distance themselves. Some texted me privately. We had no idea. Are you okay? Others simply stopped inviting us to barbecues, birthday parties, the small rituals that once stitched our lives together. His mother, Rita, called me the following Sunday. Her voice was thin, trembling. Alina, is it true? I told her the truth calmly, without embellishment. She cried on the phone, long, wrenching sobs that made me ache for the woman who'd once treated me like a daughter. I raised him better than this, she whispered. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry. I told her it wasn't her fault. But deep down, I wasn't sure anymore whose fault anything was. Maybe no one's. Maybe everyone's. Marcus moved into the guest room. Then, after a week of tense silences and children asking questions we couldn't answer, he packed a suitcase. He said he needed space to think. I didn't argue. When he hugged the kids goodbye, Sophie clung to his leg, crying, "Daddy, don't go." He looked at me over her head, eyes pleading for something: forgiveness, understanding, mercy. I gave him none of those things. I just stood there, arms folded, watching him walk out the door into the gray afternoon. The post kept growing. Strangers commented daily, "You deserve better. This is why I don't trust men. Girl, run." There were also the cruel ones. "You should have confronted him in person. Coward. Maybe you drove him away." I read them all. Some stung. Most didn't, because by then, I had already begun to understand something important. Their opinions weren't about me. They were about their own wounds, their own fears. And somewhere in the middle of that digital storm, I started to feel something unexpected. Not revenge, not satisfaction, relief. The mask was off. The pretending was over. For the first time in months, maybe years, I could breathe without the weight of a lie sitting on my chest. The weeks that followed felt like walking through fog, thick, disorienting, every step uncertain. Marcus didn't come back home. He rented a small apartment 15 minutes away, close enough for the kids to visit. Far enough that the house no longer carried the scent of his aftershave in the hallways. We told Liam and Sophie the truth in the gentlest version we could manage. Daddy and Mommy were going to live in different houses now, but we both loved them more than anything. Sophie cried herself to sleep for 3 nights straight, clutching the stuffed rabbit Marcus had given her for her 5th birthday. Liam tried to act tough, shrugging it off with "it's fine," but I found him once sitting on the stairs after lights out, staring at nothing, his small shoulders hunched like he was carrying the weight of our failure. I didn't hate Marcus. Not really. Hate requires too much energy, and I had none left to spare. What I felt was something quieter, more final. Disappointment so deep it had carved a hollow space inside me. I kept the house running on autopilot, school lunches packed, soccer practices attended, bedtime stories read, in voices steadier than I felt. At work, I smiled at patients, held hands during painful procedures, listened to their fears with the same careful attention I always had. My colleagues didn't know the details, but they sensed the change. One afternoon, during a rare, quiet moment in the break room, my friend Maria slid a mug of tea across the table to me. "You look like you're carrying the world," she said softly. I managed a small smile. Just rearranging it a little. She didn't press. That was enough. The online post continued to live its own life. It reached well over 100,000 views. People still commented, some supportive, some vicious, some strangely philosophical. I stopped checking after a while. The story wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to the internet. Occasionally, I'd see screenshots shared on other platforms, reposted with captions like "justice served" or "men ain't shit." I never replied. I didn't need validation from strangers. I needed something smaller, more real. The sound of my children laughing again. The smell of fresh sheets on a bed that finally felt like mine alone. One evening, about 2 months after Marcus moved out, Rita came over with a foil pan of her famous chicken pot pie. She hadn't visited since the phone call where she'd cried. She looked older, shoulders stooped, hands trembling slightly as she set the dish on the counter. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Marcus and I had once planned vacations and argued over paint colors. "I didn't raise him to be this way," she said again, voice raw. "I keep thinking, where did I go wrong?" I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine. Her skin was paper thin, veins blue beneath the surface. "You didn't go wrong, Rita. He's a grown man. He made choices, and so did I." She looked at me then, really looked, searching my face for bitterness and finding none. "You're not angry with me." I never was. Tears slipped down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. "I always thought of you as my daughter, Alina, still do." I squeezed her hand. "I know." That night, after she left, I sat in the quiet kitchen, with the pot pie cooling on the stove. The house smelled of butter and thyme. For the first time since everything broke, I felt something warm flicker inside me, not forgiveness exactly, but something close to peace. Marcus and I met with a mediator the following month. The process was civil, almost gentle. We divided assets quietly. The house stayed with me and the children. He kept most of the retirement savings he'd built during his years of travel and promotions. We worked out a parenting schedule that gave the kids stability. He cried again during one session, quiet, defeated tears. I handed him a tissue without comment. When it was over, He looked at me across the conference table and said, "I'm sorry, Ellie. For all of it." I nodded once. "I heard you. I didn't say I forgave him. I wasn't ready. Maybe I never would be. But I also didn't need to punish him anymore. The world had already done enough of that. His job was gone. His reputation was stained. Friends had drifted away. Lila had disappeared from the city, entirely rumor. Was she'd moved back east to live with family. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I simply noted it the way one notes the weather changing. And slowly, very slowly, life began to feel lighter. I started small things for myself. Morning walks before the kids woke up, the air crisp and smelling of wet pine. I planted lavender in the backyard, the same kind I used to burn in candles. I took a pottery class on Wednesday nights, my hands learning the feel of wet clay, the slow spin of the wheel. My fingers were clumsy at first, but they remembered how to be gentle. Liam started opening up, more talking about school, about his fears that Daddy wouldn't come back. I listened without rushing to fix it. Sophie drew pictures of our family, sometimes with Marcus in them, sometimes not. I hung them all on the fridge. One Sunday afternoon, about 8 months after the post, I was in the kitchen making soup when my phone buzzed. It was Marcus. "Can I take the kids to the park this Saturday? Just us?" I typed back, "Yes, they'd like that." No anger, no sarcasm, just yes. I set the phone down and looked out the window. The sky was the soft gray of late winter, promising spring. The children were in the living room, building a blanket fort, their laughter drifting toward me like music. I stirred the soup, the steam rising warm against my face. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled, not for anyone else, not to prove anything. Just for me. But relief is only the first step out of the shadows. True healing comes in the quiet rebuilding, brick by careful brick, when you learn to trust your own hands again. A year passed after the post 12 months of firsts, without Marcus in the frame. First Christmas, with just the three of us, the tree strung with lights that twinkled like hesitant stars. Sophie's small hands placing the angel at the top, while Liam pretended not to care. First school play, where I clapped alone in the audience. My heart swelling as Sophie twirled in her costume, feathers fluttering like forgotten dreams. First family vacation. A simple road trip to the Oregon coast, where the salt air stung our cheeks and the waves crashed with a rhythm that drowned out old echoes. I threw myself into the work of living, not out of distraction, but out of rediscovery. At the hospital, I applied for a promotion to charge nurse, the kind of role that let me mentor younger staff, sharing the lessons I'd learned in patience and presence. The interview was in a small office, smelling of stale coffee and printer ink. My hands were steady as I spoke, voice even, recounting shifts where I'd held families together through the longest nights. "I've learned that strength isn't about never breaking," I told the panel. "It's about piecing yourself back with care." They offered me the position 2 days later. The raise meant I could afford a tutor for Liam, who was struggling with math. His frustration spilling over in slammed doors and sighs. We sat together at the kitchen table most evenings, pencils scratching on paper, the scent of chamomile tea steaming between us. "You're good at this, Mom," he said one night, glancing up with a rare, genuine smile. It was a small victory, but it felt like reclaiming a kingdom. The kids adapted in ways that humbled me. Sophie started ballet classes, her tiny frame spinning across the studio floor with a grace that reminded me of myself at her age, before life layered on its weights. Liam joined a soccer team, the cleats thudding on the grass under floodlights, cheers rising from the sidelines where I'd stand with a thermos of hot chocolate. Marcus was consistent with his visits. Every other weekend, holidays split neatly. He'd arrive in the driveway with his rental car, looking more like himself each time, hair neatly trimmed. Clothes pressed but with shadows under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. The kids ran to him, and I'd watch from the porch, waving as they piled in. "Have them back by 8, I'd say, no edge to my voice. He nodded, always grateful for the civility. One Saturday, after they'd left, Rita stopped by, unannounced. She carried a quilt she'd been piecing squares of fabric from old shirts. Marcus's boyhood clothes, mixed with scraps from dresses I'd given her over the years. "For the guest room," she said, unfolding it on the couch, the threads catching the afternoon light filtering through lace curtains. We sat with mugs of her chamomile, the steam curling like whispers. She talked about her own marriage, long ended in quiet divorce after years of silences heavier than words. "I saw the signs, but stayed for the children," she confessed, fingers tracing a faded patch. "Don't make my mistake, Alina. Love yourself first." I nodded, the words settling like balm. "I am." She visited more after that Sundays for pie, helping with homework. Her laughter filling the spaces Marcus had left empty. She became grandmother and confidant, her sharp edges softened by time and regret. "You're doing right by them," she'd say, hugging me goodbye. Her perfume something floral and faint lingering like approval. Marcus's life, from what I pieced together through mutual acquaintances and the occasional group chat update, was a humbler version of before. He'd found work as a consultant, freelance gigs that kept him traveling less, home more with his regrets. Lila was a ghost. He'd mentioned once, in passing during a kid drop-off, that she'd blocked him everywhere. No dramatic reunion, no second affair, just the slow fade of infatuation under truth's light. Friends trickled back, the ones who valued history over scandal. But the industry whispers followed him, doors closing that once swung wide. He didn't complain. In our rare co-parenting emails, he was polite, punctual with child support checks that arrive like clockwork, the envelopes crisp in the mailbox. I dated once, tentatively a kind doctor from work, coffee at a cafe overlooking the Sound, the foam on my latte swirling like uncertainties. He was gentle, asked about my story without prying, but when his hand brushed mine, I felt nothing but the echo of old promises. I ended it kindly. "I'm still finding my footing," I said. He understood. Alone felt safer, richer, like rediscovering the shape of solitude after years in a tangle of limbs. Pottery became my anchor. The studio was a converted garage downtown, clay dust in the air, wheels humming steadily. My teacher, an older woman named Grace, with hands scarred from decades of creation, would watch me work. "Feel the center," she'd say, her voice low over the splash of water. One evening, I shaped a wide bowl, smooth and unyielding, the curve rising perfectly under my palms. As it spun, I thought of my life, cracked but holding, stronger at the breaks. I fired it, blue-glazed, set it on my kitchen shelf filled with lemons from the market, sunlight catching the sheen. There were hard days still. Nights when doubt crept in, whispering that I'd overreacted, that the post had been too public, too final. I'd wake with a start, the clock glowing 3:17, sheets twisted around me. But in the morning, brewing coffee, the rich, dark grounds grinding fresh-eyed, remind myself I hadn't named him, hadn't hunted Lila, hadn't slashed tires or spread rumors in person. I'd simply let truth breathe, anonymous as fog off the bay. The consequences were his to own, not mine to orchestrate. And in that ownership, I found my strength. 2 years had slipped by, like water through open fingers, quiet, steady, carrying away the sharpest edges of what once cut so deeply. The calendar, now read early 2026, and the house on the quiet. Seattle Street looked almost the same from the outside. White siding freshly painted last summer. Lavender bushes, blooming purple against the porch rail, the same oak tree dropping acorns that the children still collected in jars. Inside though, everything had shifted in the gentlest, most permanent ways. The guest room was no longer a temporary exile. It became my reading room, shelves lined with novels I'd always meant to read. A soft armchair by the window where morning light pooled like spilled honey. The master bedroom belonged to me alone, now wide bed, dressed in crisp white linens. No trace of cologne or half-read business magazines on the nightstand. I'd kept the wedding photo, though the one from the courthouse steps. Both of us 26, laughing into each other's faces like the future was something we could hold in our hands. I moved it to the hallway, high enough that the children rarely noticed it. Low enough that I could pause there sometimes and remember love without needing to punish myself for how it ended. Marcus had rebuilt, too, in his own careful way. He found steady employment at a smaller firm, one that valued experience over flash, and bought a modest townhouse 20 minutes north. The children split time between homes with the ease of kids who learned early that love docenti require the same roof. They came back from his weekends with stories of movie marathons, of pancakes shaped like dinosaurs, of quiet evenings where he asked about their days and actually listened. I never asked for details he didn't offer. He never asked me to soften the boundaries I'd drawn. We co-parented, like two people who once shared a life, and now respected the separate ones we'd each chosen. Rita remained a constant. She'd moved into assisted living the previous autumn, not because she needed it yet. She insisted, but so the grandkids have a place with an elevator and no stairs to trip over. Her apartment smelled of lemon polish and the cinnamon rolls she still baked every Sunday. We'd bring the children over, watch them chase each other down the carpeted hallway, and sit on her small balcony overlooking the parking lot, sharing tea and the small silences that no longer felt heavy. One gray January afternoon in 2026, I received a letter-reel paper envelope addressed in Marcus's familiar slanted handwriting. I opened it at the kitchen table, sunlight slanting across the wood, a half-finished cup of coffee cooling beside me. Inside was a single page. Alina. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve to ask for it. But I need you to know that every day since I walked out of our house, I've carried the weight of what I did. Not just the hurt I caused you, but the example I set for our children. I'm really trying to be a better man, not for redemption, but because they deserve it. And because you deserved better from the beginning. Thank you for raising them with grace when I couldn't. Thank you for never turning them against me. Thank you for letting me stay in their lives. I'm sorry. I will always be sorry. Marcus. I read it twice. Then I folded the paper neatly, slipped it back into the envelope, and placed it in the small wooden box on the bookshelf where I kept other quiet truths. Liam's first tooth. Sophie's hospital bracelet from when she had her tonsils out. The ultrasound photo from the pregnancy we lost before Liam was born. I didn't cry. The tears had long since dried up. What remained was something steadier, acceptance. Not of what he did, but of the fact that it happened, that it changed everything, and that I had survived the changing. Later that evening, after the children were asleep, I walked through the house, turning off lights. The floorboards creaked under my bare feet, familiar as my own heartbeat. In the kitchen, I paused at the sink, looked out at the backyard where snow dusted the lavender bushes like powdered sugar. The world outside was still and patient. I thought about revenge, not the dramatic, public kind I'd once delivered, but the quieter, more enduring one, the choice to grow roots deeper than the wound. To wake up each morning and choose kindness toward myself. To laugh at Liam's terrible jokes. To braid Sophie's hair and tell her she's strong. To let Rita hold my hand when the memories rise uninvited. To stand in the pottery studio with clay under my nails and create something beautiful from something formless. True revenge, I've learned, isn't destruction. It's refusing to let someone else's choices define the rest of your story. I turned off the last lamp and climbed the stairs in the dark. The house settling around me like a long-held breath finally released. And that, dear listener, is where my story finds its gentle landing, not in fireworks or final reckonings, but in the soft, steady rhythm of days that belong to me again. I still think about that rainy Tuesday evening sometimes, the one when my phone lit up with his desperate message, "Please, forgive me. I beg you." I never replied. Not because I'm cruel, but because some apologies arrive too late to repair what was broken. And some silences speak louder than words ever could. What I did that night, letting those messages breathe in the open, anonymous and unadorned, wasn't about destroying him. It was about refusing to carry his secret any longer. It was about choosing truth over the slow poison of pretending everything was fine. And yes, the fallout was painful. Lives unraveled. Hearts were bruised. But in the end, the only life that truly needed rebuilding was mine, and I rebuilt it with my own hands. One quiet morning, one small act of kindness toward myself at a time. I've learned that revenge, the real kind, the kind that lasts, isn't loud or vengeful. It isn't about watching someone fall. It's about rising. It's about waking up one day and realizing the ache in your chest has softened into something you can breathe around. It's about looking at your children and knowing they're safe, loved, and learning from your example that you, Dante, have to stay small to keep someone else comfortable. Marcus is still their father. He's still trying. And I'm still their mother, stronger, clearer, more myself than I've been in years. Rita still brings pie on Sundays. The lavender in the backyard still blooms every spring. Life didn't stop when the marriage ended. It just changed shape, and I learned to move with it instead of against it. So I ask you, quietly, the way I've asked myself in the stillness of many nights, if the person you trusted most shattered that trust, would you keep the pieces hidden in the dark? Or would you let the light in even if it burned at first, knowing that light is the only thing that can help you find your way back to yourself? I chose the light. And I've never regretted it. If this story touched something inside you, if you've ever had to choose between silence and truth, between staying small and stepping into who you really are, I'd love to hear from you. Tell me in the comments, what did you choose when the mask finally fell? And how did it change you? Thank you for sitting with me through this, for listening with an open heart. You're never alone in these stories. We carry them together. Until next time, take care of your heart. It's the only home you'll ever truly need. Soft music fades in. If this story moved you, if you've been finding strength in these quiet confessions, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next one. And if you'd like to support the channel and help keep these real stories coming, there's a link below. But most of all, just know you're seen, you're heard, and you're stronger than you think. Good night, dear one. Sleep gently.